Welcome back to Investing Talk Podcast. We're going to be looking at New Fortress Energy today. You sent some info over on NFE, and we're going to try to kind of pick it apart and figure out what's important here.
We've got recent stock performance, fundamentals of the company,
Mhm.
and then kind of some red flags, strengths, and overall market sentiment. So let's just kind of go through all this and figure out what's really important for you to know.
Okay, so let's just jump right in and look at the recent stock performance of New Fortress Energy. As of the latest data, it's sitting at around 6.88. The thing that kind of jumps out at you immediately is that its 52-week high is 30.52. So we're seeing a pretty significant decline, which is definitely indicating a bearish trend. It's also pretty close to its 52-week low, which is 6.85. So I guess the question is this a dip or something more?
Yeah, that's the question, right? So New Fortress Energy, founded in 2014, and their focus is on providing energy infrastructure and natural gas solutions.
Right.
They want to replace oil-based fuels with LNG, and they have a global reach. They've got operations in Latin America, the Caribbean, and North America. So this is a really interesting company because they are in a space that has potentially significant growth as the world transitions to cleaner energy sources.
Yeah, and you sent over some information about their more recent performance.
Yeah.
And what's really interesting is that on April 2nd, 2025, there was actually an increase in the stock price of 7.59%. And that was driven by positive market sentiment, and they had secured some contract extensions, which is really interesting because although the overall trend is bearish, we are seeing some positive catalysts. Over the past year, the stock has traded as low as like the $30 range,
Yeah.
and it's traded as high as like the $60 range. So this is a pretty big swing.
It is. And you got to pay attention to that. Volatility is something to really, factor into your investment decisions.
For sure.
When we look at the financials for 2023, there are some interesting things that pop out. Total revenue of $1.4 billion, which is a 42.5% year-over-year growth. Pretty significant. 872 million of that revenue came from LNG sales. 364 million came from power generation, and $164 million came from infrastructure services. So that diversification of revenue streams is a definite strength for New Fortress Energy. Profitability is up across the board too. Healthy gross profit margins, operating profit margins, net profit margins. One thing to keep an eye on, though, is their debt to equity ratio, which is currently at 1.75.
And I think that brings us to like one of the red flags that the sources were kind of pointing out. And they were saying that the debt level of this company, while it's manageable, definitely does need to be monitored, especially since they're pursuing a debt reduction strategy. Also, the stock appears to be pretty sensitive to market volatility and geopolitical factors, which is also something to keep in mind.
Yeah, for sure. But I think it's important to kind of, balance those out with the strengths of the company as well. The revenue growth, as we just talked about, is significant. They've got diversified revenue streams. And recently, there's been some positive market sentiment following their contract extensions and some asset sales they made, which kind of, maybe paints a rosier picture. Another thing that's interesting is that the analyst sentiment in general seems to be pretty positive. The majority of analysts are recommending a buy with an average target price that's significantly higher than the current price. But, it's important to note that some analysts have lowered their targets, and that's mainly due to execution risks.
Yeah. So when we're thinking about the competitive landscape, New Fortress Energy is going up against some pretty big companies, right? ConocoPhillips and Cheniere Energy. But New Fortress Energy's strength seems to be in this niche of providing customized turnkey energy solutions. And they've got a strong presence in emerging markets, too. I wonder if this specialization could be a key factor in their future success. When we talk about turnkey energy solutions, what exactly does that mean? What does NFE actually do?
That's a great question. When we say turnkey, we're talking about the fact that they handle every aspect of the energy solution. So for NFE, this includes developing the infrastructure for receiving and processing LNG. It includes the construction of power plants, and even includes distribution of the energy they generate. They're essentially offering a one-stop shop for their clients.
Wow, so that really kind of clarifies their focus. Moving forward, it looks like the upcoming earnings reports are going to be really crucial to watch. Like, are they going to continue to grow? Are they going to continue to be profitable? How are those asset sales going in Jamaica? And how are they doing with reducing their debt? These are all going to be really important signals about their financial stability. And of course, like you said, any shifts in energy policies or the overall market are always going to be key risks.
Absolutely. One of the sources you sent mentioned specifically that New Fortress Energy is operating in the LNG sector, which is particularly susceptible to global trends in the energy market. Geopolitical tensions can have a huge impact, even changes in energy policies. So paying close attention to the broader macroeconomic and political landscape is essential. This is definitely not a company you can just invest in and forget about. You got to keep your finger on the pulse of what's happening around the world. And the fact that they're emphasizing reducing emissions and promoting economic growth through energy solutions, it also means that broader economic conditions and environmental policies can really sway investor confidence. Operational updates and quarterly earnings releases are going to be major catalysts for movement in the stock price.
So taking all of this into consideration, what do you make of it all? What are the key takeaways?
Well, for those who already hold shares in NFE, I think a hold might be the most sensible move right now, considering those recent positive developments we talked about and the strategic steps they're taking. For those considering a new investment in NFE, I'd say a wait-and-see approach is probably wise. Keep a close eye on their debt reduction efforts and how they're responding to these fluctuating market conditions. The volatility and the debt levels are valid concerns, but their growth potential and diversified business model are definitely promising factors.
Yeah. What I find fascinating is the fact that the stock price is so low right now. It could be a sign that the company is oversold. But when you look at their fundamentals, they're showing some pretty solid revenue growth in a sector that's extremely dynamic right now. This leads to a pretty interesting question. How much weight should an investor give to short-term bearish trends versus the potential for long-term growth, especially in a market as unpredictable as this one?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's one that each investor needs to answer for themselves based on their own risk tolerance investment goals.
That's right. And that's a wrap for a deep dive on New Fortress Energy. We hope you found this insightful. Remember to subscribe, like, and comment below to let us know what you think, and if there are any other companies or topics you'd like us to unpack in the future.
We'll be here, ready to delve into the next exciting investment opportunity. Until then, happy investing, everyone.